For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Thabi Madiba. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss rebuilding our political life. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
How can we rebuild our political life?
Well, what I'm suggesting is that one of the lessons we must draw is that since 1990, a number of other, in the liberation struggle, we stressed unity and uniting black and white, uniting all sections of the oppressed people. And we made this emphasis on unity. But what we also need to take into account now is that a number of sectors have arisen with distinct interests. There's like the Me Too movement in America. There have been movements about violence against women and children in South Africa. That has been insufficiently incorporated in organization around building our democracy. There's the violent masculinities that goes with it. There are the distinct identities. I was talking just now about land, but land is tied with identities. Insofar as traditional leaders, for example, are seen as custodians of the land by some people, what about the communities who fall within that jurisdiction? They are not all the same, from the same clans. They sometimes have different customs. All these identities must be safeguarded in the South Africa that we want to build. And that requires a different type of democracy where we don't see ourselves merely as a voting public, but also people who sometimes exercise our rights as political beings by going into the streets, marching, or building organizations of popular type.
And President Ramaphosa brought back the notion of unity, which we know that it was there decades ago. So what can we expect differently from the unity that was there decade ago?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that notion of unity. Obviously, the ANC is very divided at the moment. You can see they speak with different voices, and that was evident at the conference. But the ANC is not the society, and the rest of us need to find expression within that unity in a way that is meaningful to us. We don't all want to find expression by joining the DA or the ANC or the EFF or whatever. We may want to organize as professionals, nurses, doctors, teachers, youth, etc., etc. Now, a lot of these organizations, types of organizations, used to be important, and some have collapsed, but as I said in answer to the previous question, there are now new ways in which people are giving expression to their identities, to their ways of being, making their marks in the public terrain. Fees Must Fall is an example. Some of the things that have happened have been transient. For example, people came out for Zuma to fall, but they never became part of an organization whereby they continued to be politically active. They just did this, and then that was the end of it. So my sense is the content of unity must be scrutinized, must be debated, and it must be, there's ANC unity, but there's the unity of the country as a whole, which I think is important, but it must not be a way of suppressing. You see, you can unify some. By unifying some, you can also suppress others.
So do you think this organizations such as the hashtag Fees Must Fall movement and the Abahlali Basemjondolo movement, which fights for people living in the informal settlements, have a role to play in rebuilding politics?
Well, they're different. Fees Must Fall is not a sort of membership-based organization. They say that they're loose, they don't have leaders. I don't know, it varies, maybe more organized in one place than others. And at the moment, it doesn't seem as strong as it was a few years ago. I'm not sure. You know, you have to be present to know what is happening. Abahlali is a membership-based organization, and it is very coherently organized. It suffers a lot of losses through police killings and things like that, but it is a very important organization, although it is under siege all the time, and it doesn't get a lot of support from organizations that call themselves left-wing, because when Abahlali has faced assassinations and things like that, it hasn't found a lot of support except from some progressive legal organizations like SERI, Socioeconomic Research Institute. A number of progressive academics have recorded their stories. So I think Abahlali is very important. I think the principle of fees must fall is very important. However, it needs to consider a structured presence. Now, it's always difficult to do that with a student population changing all the time. You know, you elect someone this year, then they've graduated or something. But it's hard to organize on a continuous basis if you don't have structures.
And lastly, what do you mean when you say it is important that we must not assume that the predominance of party politics and contesting elections is the only possible way of political self-realization? Political self-realization.
Yes, well, I am saying really that for me to vote every 5 years and have no political outlet apart from that is not, in my view, the way in which democracy has always been conceived. In the 1980s, in the UDF, people did a lot of things in their streets, in their blocks, a whole lot of things all over the country. And they were quite creative about it. And it's helped reduce crime in some areas. Had some abuses, but it was very important. Now, this is actually the original definition of democracy by Aristotle, which is direct rule of the people. Now, my argument is that you don't have to get rid of representative democracy, voting, but it can coexist with direct democracy. Even with all this IT, in fact, the IT can help to have direct democracy where people are reached through IT and express their opinions on things. So that is what I mean, that we should not be passive except when we have to cast our votes.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about rebuilding our political life.